very briefly, some of you know this story, how I got involved in NSA is I was in and have been all my career in the computer field, but back in the mid-70s I decided I wanted to get out of the computer field and go do something else, and so I got involved in trying to market goal-setting programs and lead goal-setting programs. And I knew nothing about business, nothing about sales, nothing about anything, and so my business was a complete flop. So I took the Dale Carnegie sales course. And at the end of that course, at the very end, they have a banquet, it's a graduation banquet, and people can bring their significant others, if they have them, to the banquet for celebration. So I didn't have a significant other, but one of the guys in the class was a realtor named Richard Kelton, and he brought his significant other, a woman named Patricia Fripp. And I had remembered her name because I was in Toastmasters at the time, and she had placed second in a regional speech contest, or actually a district speech contest, and I thought maybe I could learn something from her. So I quit the club I was in and joined the club she was in. Shortly after which she stopped going to the club. But she was a hairstylist at the time, and I became one of her clients. And for the next couple of years, one morning a month, 7 o'clock in the morning, we would meet at her thing, and she would cut my hair, and we would talk about speaking. And she got me involved in NSA. So in the beginning, back in those days, this was 1978 when I first joined NSA, there were no chapters. And chapters came along in 1980 when National decided that they wanted to get people involved on a local level. And so there was a gathering at Bert Decker's office the summer of 1980. Bert Decker was the second president of the chapter, is still involved. Decker Communications, speech training, been around for many years. And an organizational meeting to decide how we were going to do this. And so they decided Fripp would be the president. The first meeting took place in September 1980, and there were 92 people in attendance.
Wow. Wow.
So just to give you a little bit of perspective of how the organization changed, when I was president, we had, at our board retreat, when I became president, we had at the time 325 members. And our typical meeting attendance was about 230. We decided at that point that we wanted, it had grown so much, we wanted quality over quantity. And so we decided that you had to belong to National in order to belong to the chapter. Because at the beginning, you didn't have to belong to National to belong to a chapter. So a lot of people came in, everybody who was remotely interested in speaking came and joined the chapter. We decided that about 6 months before National decided that you had to do that. So that started to cut the membership down. And then about, I forget, 10, 12 years ago, National put in the requirements for what you have. You meet a certain level of speaking proficiency before you can join the National organization. And that cut membership way down. So that's kind of where we are today. Back in the beginning, we made a couple of good decisions. I think probably the best decision was to not have monthly meetings. Have meetings every other month. Because any organization, if you belong to, that has a monthly meeting, it's a struggle to put on a great meeting every month and to find speakers. So every other month works for us, 5 meetings a year. And what we wanted at the beginning was to do better than National, have better meetings than National had. And it was, we said, how do speakers speak? They speak to audience at meetings, typically. Either it's a meeting that somebody else has put on and you were invited as a speaker, or it's a meeting you have put on, but you are the speaker. And we said, NSA-NC is going to be a model for speakers. It's going to show speakers how a meeting should be done. And that was the goal. So it was a goal to always start on time. If we were going to have a newsletter, to have an excellent newsletter. It basically was to have quality in everything we did to serve as a model for the speakers. And I think, this personal opinion, I think over the years, sometimes we've sort of wandered away from that ideal. And that, Karen asked me, what would we like to see? I'd like to see us wander back towards that ideal. And to have meetings that people look at and go, wow, That's how a meeting should be done. Some things we did back in the, we used to have these little name tags that went around your neck, because National had those. They were done by a company in Phoenix. And they were little bolo ties with your neck. And so at the end of the meeting, we'd collect all those. We didn't have everybody keep their own name tag. And we'd have a big pile of meetings and cords, and all these things got all confused. So I made up little envelopes with a person's name on it, 300 and some envelopes, and wrapped up each person's name tag and put it in there every time. See, I did the job Joanne did for a couple of years when I was the membership director. That was keep track of all the meetings and all the name tags and all the dues and everything like that. So I have some appreciation for what Joanne goes through. We used to have lick and stick parties.
Oh,
yeah. We used to actually have a real newsletter. And these are some examples of newsletters over the years. I'll pass these around. Chapter News, it used to be called Chapter Chatter for a while, was an addition to the newsletter. We'd have the newsletter come out every other month, and then the chapter news come out every other month about what was going on in the chapter. Things we do in the newsletter is we'd have pictures and write-ups of all the new members, so people could get to know them. I understand for budgetary reasons and other things, we don't do newsletters anymore. I think that our Constant Contact newsletter is sort of a poor substitute for a real newsletter, but it's what we're doing. So anyway, just pass some of these around so you can see over the years the kind of things we had. So if you were at the meeting last month when we honored Joanne, and I pulled out the newsletter that had introduction of Joanne, and I have all the newsletters back to the very first newsletter that we had. So I may be missing a couple, but it's kind of my archive. So I'm sort of the official historian as well.